Welcome to the Tech Simple podcast. Independent insights into the latest AV technologies, as well as tips and best practices to optimize AV solutions for modern workplace and learning environments. Here are your hosts, David and Jonathan from Konnectus AV Consulting.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Tech Simple podcast. Great to have you all here. As always, I'm Jonathan Cuthbertson, and I'm joined by my good friend and colleague, David Allara. Welcome, David.
Yes, hi there, Jonathan. How are things today?
I am a happy man. It's coming into summer and we've got the sun out. But enough about my personal life. What are we here to talk about today?
Well, today we've got our second international guest, or international podcast, I should say, in a row, because the last one was not an international guest. You were actually in a different geographical location in China. But today our guest is from the United States. He is the CEO of AVIXA, Mr. Dave Labuskes. And for those of you listening not familiar with AVIXA, it's a global AV industry representative body. And Dave is going to share all the details about it with us today. Of particular interest, he's going to explain how AVIXA benefits not just those working in the AV industry, but the ultimate customers of what all we do as well. So in our chat, I'm looking forward to discussing trends in AV with you both, and not just in Australia, by the way, but in all the different parts of the world. That's the beauty of having Dave on the show. He's got insight and exposure to all the different continents, except Antarctica, I'm led to believe. Lastly, as we get to the end of the podcast, I'm going to ask Dave what excites him the most about the AV industry today and into the future. So looking forward to his response on that one. So without further ado, let's get started chatting with our esteemed guest today. Well, Dave, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to share the stage with you at the Integrate conference in Sydney just recently. We were on that panel discussion there talking about the state of the industry, which was quite fun. And, having listened to some of the things you said that day, I thought it would be just so valuable to have you on the show and have you share, some additional thoughts for our audience here on the Tech Simple podcast. So I guess what I'd like to get underway with is AVIXA. You're the CEO of AVIXA, and all three of us here obviously know what AVIXA is. It's, the industry, the AV industry that we've worked in for decades now. But I think for the audience, it would be great to give them a bit of an understanding on what AVIXA is and how it can ultimately benefit them. So, Dave, why don't you tell us, just to get started off with, what is AVIXA and what's, I suppose, it all about?
Sure. No, and thanks for your kind words. Very rarely do I participate in a panel and somebody wants me back to talk anymore. So it reaffirms once again the friendliness of the Australian marketplace. So AVIXA is an acronym. It actually is the Audiovisual and Integrated Experience Association. And it's a very explicitly determined name to focus in on not only the audiovisual technology that is used to connect people to each other, whether in a physical space or a hybrid space or a remote space, but also the experience that is created with that technology. So, and a focus finally with the word association on the fact that we are a not-for-profit industry association. We have aspects of our association that are focused around the professionals within the industry or the individuals that are looking to learn more about the industry, as well as the enterprises within the industry. And in that vein, represent the entire supply chain, from manufacturers of the technology, developers of the technology, through distribution, installation/integration, consultants, and end users. And we exist really for two key purposes. One is to be a catalyst for the growth of that marketplace. Can't really directly grow that marketplace, but if we can reduce friction, if we can highlight the benefits and advantages of utilizing the technology that our membership delivers, utilizing the solutions that our membership can help bring to bear, then that generally will increase the value of those solutions and generally increase the consumption of those solutions. And then on the addition to being a catalyst for market growth, we see a key mission of ours to be the hub for that AV community. And really all of the ways that that word is used, to be a place for people to get together and tell war stories and share their learnings, for people to take formal education training. We offer certifications, we develop standards, and as you alluded to, we convene the industry around the world in trade shows, conferences, and other types of gatherings, both virtually and physically. So I know you have a 20-minute podcast, and I probably just talked for 10 minutes of it. You might have had another question. My apologies.
No, that's perfect, because it's probably highlighting a little bit of the limits or limitation to what we've been exposed to, I should put it that way, when it comes to AVIXA. Because, I've been to AVIXA organised trade shows around the world, and Jonathan and I are familiar with, CTS certification, and also, there are some fantastic training plans which I think are very important, which we'll get to talk about in a minute. But the other one is the standards, and the AVIXA standards I think are so important to keep referring back to, just to elevate the quality of experience. Going back to what you were talking about in the beginning, that ultimately the consumers of audiovisual systems, the end customers and the end users, can have. But there sounds like there's a lot more to it, as you're just talking about there. It's not just a US company. I think it might have started, or a US organization, I think it might have started that way, and then gradually became bigger and bigger and is now global, I'm assuming, in all continents. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of penguins involved in it yet, so no membership that we've actually been able to attract in Antarctica, but there is a good deal of AV on that continent, and it was likely installed by a AVIXA member firm. Yes, absolutely. We started in 1939 in the United States. Contrary to what my kids think, I really wasn't around when it started. And I think there's always going to be some sort of sense or interpretation that we are US-based, but we really, truly aren't, actually. At this point, over 50% of our revenues are from outside of North America. The non-North America, there's a double negative in there somewhere. Membership is the fastest growing segment of the membership. We have staff in Europe, Asia, India, Australia, Latin America, and North America. I think we've experienced as an employer, as a company, the same that many, if not all, companies have experienced over the last number of years. When we have been focused on serving the globe as effectively as we can, that's an impossible thing to do, right? You don't serve the globe, you serve Australia or you serve India. And even there, you're serving the East Coast or the West Coast or Central. And we can only spread the marmalade so thin and still have some impact. So we do have areas where we've been more focused on, but most of, or all of my staff at this point are remote. And our team is far less geographically organized and far more functionally organized. So, for example, marketing in Asia Pac does not report to Jonathan Seller, who is our Senior Director of Asia Pac. Marketing reports into marketing. And content delivery reports into content delivery, and membership services report into membership services. So we have a matrix structure in place to serve a region with focus on that region, but then to deliver those services in a consistent fashion around the world. It's just much more efficient to go that route.
As a member of AVIXA, my engineering team get a lot out of AVIXA. The standards David was talking about really allows us to benchmark ourselves, and also all of the certifications and training. So we, as an AV company, get a lot out of AVIXA, but for the end users and the end customers, what benefit does AVIXA play for them?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jonathan. Thanks. I'm glad that there's the value that we're creating for your organization. You're asking an age-old question, which is, so what, from the perspective of your customers? And there's a couple of things. And we've created some of these mechanisms in response to a pandemic where individuals couldn't interact with us in a more traditional fashion. But also to acknowledge and recognize that AV may be important enough for you to schedule time in Sydney for 3 days to attend a trade show and education. It's likely not that important to your customer. They actually have 137 other things that they need to do in order to run their organization. And essentially, the reason you're there is because they don't do it themselves. They want you to do it. But they should be informed consumers of that professional service that your firm offers. And they can obtain that informed consumer status with a pretty light lift working through AVIXA. We've got Exchange, exchange.avixa.org, which is an online community that's probably some sort of copyright violation here, but it'd be sort of the LinkedIn of AV. It's the thought leadership articles being posted by industry participants. So, if your customer, you could refer them to something you posted there and then also see reactions from other members of the industry there. It's an opportunity for them to also potentially see your competitor there and see what they're saying, and then make their own judgments on who they want to reach out to and explore possible future solutions with. And you can use it as a portal to dive in as deeply as you want. There are lots of people that get assigned the job of, installing a couple of hybrid conference rooms, and then we suck them into this industry because it's a fun industry. And these types of tools and these types of areas of engagement, both virtually and physically, are pathways for people to learn. And just like any other pathway, you could take the walk as long as you like. And at a certain point, you may have reached the destination of knowledge and expertise that you want. We also have AVIXA TV online, which is, I'll violate another copyright, a Netflix of AV, where you have 3 to 5 minute short form videos that take you behind the scenes of projects and talk about how they do that. Or it could be educational content. Why do you need to have intentional infrastructure in place to support an 8K video distribution as opposed to a 4K? And your customer may be the type of customer that knows what that title even means, or they may not be. And in 3 minutes, at least they know why it matters when they say to you, well, I'd like to make sure I've got the capability for 32K. You could walk through that with them then and use it as a tool, either to introduce them to it. And then finally, I know I'm rambling a little bit with you guys, but the value of standards is it's not then Jonathan's opinion or David's opinion or Dave's opinion. It's a rigorously developed document that is ISO, ANSI accredited documentation that states that these are the minimum standards by which you should adhere in order to achieve the performance that is necessary in order to have the functionality that is being paid for. And that takes you back to that catalyst for market growth, right? So the worst thing in the world that happens is when a customer is not sure what they want, then they pay for something, and they're not sure that they got what they paid for, and they're not sure they're happy with it. And sometimes you're dealing in such a gray area that just eliminating some of those variables creates a much more positive experience for both the provider and the buyer.
So that really kind of lifts our whole industry as a whole to another level, and it gives that confidence to the consumer or our customers when they do purchase something that they're going to get something quality without that risk.
Exactly. I mean, we have certain presumptions that are built into, and maybe they should or shouldn't be, but those areas that are really easily or directly tied to life safety, right? We presume that an architect is going to employ a structural engineer that is going to effectively design a foundation that is not going to crumble when we build the building. And that's regulated through codes, which are laws that essentially serve the same purpose as standards. Where the two separate from themselves is that standards are typically more focused on performance than life safety. When you move to somebody's life being put at jeopardy, that tends to be regulated by the government, whereas standards tend to be a targeted point of performance that an industry agrees to as a minimum viable, valuable performance level. And that's something that an individual company can't write, because then it's yours, it's your bias. This is one of the purposes for an association like ours, is to bring all of the participants within that supply chain together to agree to that, which is the standard of performance. And that's all available without having to spend 6 days going to a trade show.
And I think that's really important, especially in the Australian market. We probably don't see the reference to AVIXA standards anywhere near as much as we should be doing. What would you say to that, Jonathan? Do you agree?
Yes, in a word, really hasn't.
And that's ultimately responsibility of companies like ourselves and other integration companies and consultants to inform the end users and make sure that they understand that there is this set of performance standards, and because it is about performance and creating experiences that a certain level, a certain quality. And I think if we use that tool a little bit better, we could probably get some better outcomes for customers overall in this country. That's just my personal humble opinion, but it is absolutely fantastic that we have a body like AVIXA that puts out these standards and continually updates them and makes improvements or creates new ones that we are able to have access to. So I guess we can thank AVIXA and thank you, Dave, for making that possible.
It's not some like machine of people sitting in a back room. The people that work on and ultimately write those standards are people like you and Jonathan. They're volunteers. We convene them, we facilitate. And yes, I think that in itself is a critical part of the process. But it's also really, don't thank AVIXA, but thank your peers, and then get involved and volunteer and contribute to those standards.
Yeah, that's a very good point, very good takeaway. I'd like to pivot on to talking trends. Now, workplace and education markets is probably the main focus of this podcast, and the members of the audience listening would be in those sectors or working in those sectors predominantly. Now, locally in Australia, Jonathan, what would you say are some of the top trends you're seeing at the moment or in the last year or two, and perhaps looking into the crystal ball for the next 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, look, I mean, probably the thing that's most prevalent is simplification of design. And this is kind of a two-factor item. So the simplification of design, you're getting less number of pieces of equipment. There's less boxes into a design, which means it's more robust, more reliable. But each of those boxes are doing a lot more as well. Rather than just having a single function, they're doing many, many things. They might be doing audio, video, and they're also controlling a camera. But the big trend there is, rather than having hardware components to do that, it's a software-driven functionality. So we're seeing, you put a box in today, it's a simple design, one box solution. But then in a week's time, there's a software update that provides additional features. In a year's time, there's another software update, and it really revolutionizes the product. So that's definitely a huge trend. And then the other one that comes to mind, and it's definitely emerging, it's not very prevalent right now, but it's more of a commercial trend for AV. And what I'm seeing is organizations that have large AV deployments. They don't want to have to front up a huge amount of capital every time they do an upgrade. Every 3 or 5 years, that they don't want to have to front up that money. What they'd much rather do is move it into an operational budget and pay a monthly subscription for a meeting room. So AV as a service. This is something I'm seeing many organizations desire. And I think this is coming from a lens of, hey, in the IT world, whoever buys a printer anymore? You pay a monthly fee, they come and service it, they replace the hardware and it breaks down, and I never have to think about it. I just pay my $100 or $1,000 a month, and that's all I have to think about. And I think there's a big trend to move that into the AV meeting room space, definitely, and also teaching spaces as well.
Yeah, definitely seeing that as well. And we talked briefly about that in our Integrate chat the other week, Dave. The other thing we talked about, artificial intelligence. And before I jump into that, though, I do want to listen to. I cut you off there, Dave. I do want to listen to what you were about to say.
No, we're seeing those two trends. Those same two trends. It's easier and easier to build complexity into a component, and that just shifts the value proposition of companies like yours in regards to their interactions with the end users. It used to be that people would make a really good living by taking 736 different switches and widgets and blocks, and they put up the black cape, and they'd spend 3 weeks, and then they would pull back the curtain and suddenly say, here, push this button and watch what it can do. And now that button's in a box, and it comes off the shelf and shows up tomorrow via delivery, and you plug it in and you push the button, and suddenly all of that black magic has moved to the factory level rather than into the integration itself. And absolutely, this commercial drive towards OPEX rather than the CAPEX, it's both a demand and a supply drive. Frankly, It's a recurring revenue. By the way, Jonathan, I have a number of printers I am happy to provide you for $100,000 a month. But yeah, I think those are both happening. What's interesting is the Australian market, although a very, very small portion of the global AV marketplace, is absolutely a marketplace where innovation is trial run, or where you know better than I do why that happens in Australia. I think from an outsider's point of view, some of it is because you have really strong ties at a nexus point between East and West in your trade and your business influences. An island off a 4 hours flight from anywhere in the world. And as such, you have a level of self-dependence that I think has driven culturally we're just going to make it work, whatever we got to do. And we can't just call home and make it work by doing that. We got to figure it out ourselves. And that is reflected in the installations that I see there and the interactions between the AVIXA members in Australia and the end users. So those trends that you described, they are absolutely trends. They're more, in many parts of the world, they're discussion points rather than actual trends. I know a lot of the major manufacturers in our industry use focus groups during Integrate to really spend time with the channel and the end users in Australia as part of their longer term roadmap development. So you guys are in a great place to actually teach the rest of the world where we're heading.
Yeah, well, I guess you're right. When you're so far away from everything, you've got to make things work on your own, don't you? And maybe that's just the way it's always been in Australia. And give us a little bit of tech, and we'll get 110, 120% out of it, and even come up with new ways of doing things. I mean, I know Jonathan absolutely loves doing that. You lock him in a closet with a bit of tech, and he'll come out probably 5 weeks later and produce something magnificent. So I guess it's definitely something you can relate to, mate.
Absolutely. Get it to do something that you never thought was possible.
I do want to just touch quickly and get both your opinions on artificial intelligence. Dave, why don't you kick it off first, and then I'll ask Jonathan.
Yeah, I don't know. Have either of you been in any meeting or any discussion for the last 3 months where AI hasn't been raised as a topic.
Oh, absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. It's everywhere. I'm sick of hearing it, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah. And being a bit of a smarmy guy that I am, I've kind of fixated on artificial intelligence versus alleged intelligence.
Love it.
and I think it's really critical to, in particular, our industry participants. You just listen to the exchange we just had with Jonathan about, let's put a bunch of gadgets together and create something new. I once heard somebody say, if you let product engineers design a product, you'd end up with a barbecue grill that works perfectly well underwater, because that's an impossible problem to solve. However, it provides a product that has actually no practical use whatsoever. And believe me, I love product engineers, but I think it's this team, right? And the challenge is starting with what is the problem, and then after having some clarity in what is the problem, then begin to look to how do we solve that, and what tools are available or what tools need to be invented to solve that problem. Not what tools exist and are fun to have, but what are the problems that our customers have? How do we intimately understand those and then provide innovative solutions? And if AI or text format models are a part of that solution, then we should look to how do we apply those. But a lot of times, technology providers end up selling a lot of different technology in search of a need. And that's the phase I see happening right now.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's probably a fair point. It's throwing a lot of stuff at the wall to see what sticks, and then going from there. But it is maybe a little bit back to front. It's what are the problems and what actually needs to be solved, and what in the tool chest could we apply to solve those? That's sage advice from millennia, which remains unchanged. What about you, Jonathan?
Well, let me first start by saying I think AI as a term is used very, very broadly, and it's been stuck onto products that have existed for a long time, and all of a sudden they're being rebranded as AI. So there's a lot of that going on. But I think we're also in very early days of AI, and I liken AI to programming. If you sat down today and you went about creating a new piece of software, no software engineer is creating that whole program from scratch. Rather, what they're doing is they're taking, a module or a piece of code that was written 5-10 years ago that does one particular function, and they're going to somewhere else and they're grabbing another module that does a different function, and they're grabbing all of these modules and putting them together to give an outcome, to do something that's valuable. Now, in the world of AI, the number of those little pre-made little bits is still very small. So there's not a lot of options to combine different functionalities. It's, almost like, a carpenter walking onto site, looking in his tool belt, and he's just got one chisel. He doesn't have anything else to actually create something. So I think there's real opportunity to solve real problems with AI, but we don't have all the building blocks available to us yet. And I think we're going to see over the next few years more of these little components be created, like a ChatGPT, like a automatic image creator. And as we get more of those little parts available, we'll be able to put them together into one cohesive product or piece of software to deliver real value.
I think that's very insightful, Jonathan. I think it's very insightful. I think it's a fabulous metaphor. If you look back to 20, 30 years ago, what we thought was sophisticated code, and you look at what you have today that we think is sophisticated code, I think we'll go through that same type of evolution. The phase that we're in is the phase that I tend to try to make sure I shine a little bit of a light on and try to stop the, sort of shiny object, because you create really the difference, artificial intelligence versus alleged intelligence. And money likes money, right? That was one of the points I made on the panel, I think, at Integrate, David, is that we could go to virtual reality, we could go to 3D TV. There are a couple other sort of code technologies that our industry participants all snicker at, that if we lose sight of the fact that that carpenter is actually trying to turn wood into a product and focus on the coolest and newest chisel that we could give him, and he actually needs a hammer, we haven't solved the problem that existed in the first place.
So, Dave, I'd just like to close out our chat today with a question. What excites you the most about the AV industry today and into the future? As a leader of an organisation, global organisation in the AV world, what do you find exciting?
Maybe it's surprising to you, but I find actually today the exact same thing excites me about this industry that excited me about this industry when I was offered this position 10 years ago, and when I entered the industry in one fashion or another 20 plus years ago. I think this is an industry that encompasses an amazingly magical point of intersection between science and people, between emotion and technology. And as such, it attracts people to participate within that industry that value that intersection point. And it's not an easy place to play. There's no structured career path in our industry. Many people would like AVIXA to create that. I think in some ways, the absence of that is why anybody that's been in this industry for 4 or 5 years and tries to leave ends up coming back. And you end up with a group of people that are really just passionate about connecting human beings to human beings. And when you have that, then truly it's an industry that allows you to be as much of a geek as you want or can be, and yet at the same point contribute to changing the way people experience the world. And I think that's timeless value. And it became critical from a very practical, moving away from sort of that lofty, poetic, philosophical description to, if you look over the last few years of the global experience, we kept humanity together as an industry. And
very true.
I get to be a part of that every day and talk to people that are passionate about that every day. And the rest of the world is starting to value it both pragmatically and commercially. And I think that's incredibly exciting.
That kind of leads on to what excites me about our industry and what the future holds. It's always been such a creative industry, people thinking outside of the box, coming up with solutions and services for people's real problems. The pandemic really thrust the AV industry into the spotlight. And I think people were exposed to an industry they never knew existed. And what excites me about that is it's really attracting new talent and new people to come to our industry with new ideas. So I see a great future for AV just because it's having that exposure now to attract new people from different industries that never used to even acknowledge the existence or know about us, contributing their ideas and possibilities.
Well, new talent coming into the industry and an industry body, AVIXA, elevating the standards. How could you go wrong? I mean, at this point, I might wrap it up there. I think this has been a really exciting discussion, very insightful for sure. Definitely on par, if not better, with our panel chats at the Integrate conference the other week, Dave. So I'd really like to thank you and Jonathan, as always, on another really valuable podcast. Now, just before we wrap up, Dave, what's the best way for the listeners to either get in touch with yourself or AVIXA directly? What are some...
You can get to us at avixa.org, AVIXA.org on the internet. There's AVIXA TV. There's the exchange.avixa.org, are two that I mentioned. And I can probably the easiest way to get me is via email. I'm pretty fanatical about being responsive to that, and that's Labuskes at AVIXA.org.
Awesome. We'll make sure everyone's got those in the show notes. So thanks again, Dave. Thanks again, Jonathan. And we'll look forward to chatting again soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Tech Simple podcast. To like, share, or discover more episodes, head over to Spotify. If you'd like to talk to us about AV in your workplace or learning environment, book an initial discovery call with David or Jonathan at konnectus.com.au. And remember,
Tech Simple!